Hi, welcome back to another episode of Coldstream Rod Shop. I'm Derek Fraser. In this week's video, we're going to start off by finishing off working on the tail pan or lower deck lid or lower bonnet or lower boot or whatever you want to call it, this panel here. There's a bunch of reinforcing stuff I have to still put in. There's a final little tweaking. I got it really close at the end of the last week's video, so now we just want to, I ran out of time, so we'll finish that off. Then I think the next thing we'll do is work on doing the wheel wells. There's some panels over there that came with it. I'll try and use those. Besides that, that may be all we do on the T this week because I've got to go work on the 33. There's a bunch of small stuff on the 33 to do. A bunch of little bits and pieces, gauges got to be wired up, hooked up, a few things, final wiring. I don't know if I mentioned it on last week's video or not, but I tried putting a 16-inch fan in here. It was too big, 14 was too big, and then ultimately what I did, I found out that I could run two 10-inch fans, one on top of the other, and it fits, so they're kind of in there right now. I sort of have to finish that wiring and make sure that that works, but just a whole bunch of small stuff on the 33. I'll try and cover it, but it may not be something I can really do time lapse with, but we'll just do the show and tell thing. Whatever I do on the T, we'll try and keep the time lapse going so you'll see what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, and see me working, I guess. So anyway, give us feedback continuously if it's enough or too much of the time lapse, what you want to see, don't want to see. Anyways, we're going to be working on the 27T and the 33 Ford. So in last week's episode, we got the tail pan and the corners on the 27T coupe. Well, right there. What I'm going to work on right now, the panel was fit in. I changed the contour of the side so it was fitting the side profile of the rear quarters. But right now what we've got to do is basically put it in permanently or relatively permanently. The thing is, they were originally riveted in some places. There was nuts and bolts in others. There's a subframe connector between the two. I'll show you in a couple seconds. That has to be welded in place. And there's the support also that we repaired last week. We've got to weld that in place. So what I'll do is I'm going to flip the camera around in a couple seconds, and then I will show you what I've done so far. I've done a little bit of work, basically putting the nuts, 1/4-inch 20 nut and bolts in the sides to hold things in place, but that's it. That's straightforward to do. What I'll do now though is I'll show you where I've got to basically do rivet areas or areas which we're going to spot weld instead of riveting them, but kind of get all that tidied up and get that rear tail pan put back in place. So here it is on the other side of the camera, where you see the C-clamps in place right now. There's actually two rivets that would normally have gone through here and here. What I'm going to do is I'll drill through, I'll weld those in place. On the inside, right there, you can see those. There are 4 1/4-inch 20 nuts and bolts that go through the quarter panels into the lower deck lid. It was just a matter of cleaning the holes up, putting those nuts and bolts in place and then tightening those up. And then this section here is the replacement subframe connector. What I've got to do with that, there's a bunch of holes we will drill into tabs and weld it back in place there. And then lastly, like I said, that is the support that we repaired on last week's video. It's going to go into place like that. I've got to basically weld that back in place as well, just to tie everything together. So what I'll do is I'll set the time-lapse camera up. I'll do my best to show you drilling, as long as the camera angle allows it, drilling the holes and welding things back up on it. So next up, I wanted to fit the deck lid in place. Now I did weld everything in for the lower pan. That pan is sitting down as far as the original one was. And I don't want to go any further because we're going to get a mismatch between the corners and the pan itself. I put it exactly where the original one was when we took it off. Now the other thing though, since we're also dealing with a deck lid that didn't come on this vehicle, it's a newer deck lid or a different deck lid. We're trying to fit that in place now. Right now I've kind of got it in. I really didn't know what I was doing, so I didn't set the time lapse up. So I kind of had to muck around with it a little bit, but essentially the deck lid goes in with two brackets right here. There's elongated holes on both sides. There are 5/16 nuts and bolts, and then there's a pivot pin here and here. I tried putting it in with them locked in place, but I found the best thing to do was to leave those nuts loose, put the deck lid in, fit it as best you can, and then tighten them up. Now, a couple things that caused me some difficulty was that there was a nut and a bolt here through this point, because this back panel was off at one point. So the nut and the bolt were interfering with the deck lid closing. And then there's a seal that goes across here, which was old and hard. I will show you on the outside. I had to take this off. There was no give to it. So it sat along the top where you see those holes and the rust mark. So if you can imagine, it was sitting in behind this lip here and was preventing the deck lid from going down. Now, so far, the deck lid is fitting okay. I did have to cheat a little bit. I did have to take a wooden block and I put it under this corner here, and I had to basically, twist this corner down because the deck lid wasn't quite straight. Got that sorted out. But the difficulty I'm having at the moment is that it's not closing all of the way. I've checked all the clearances. There was a drip rail on the inside here that was bent, so it was catching up with that. So that drip rail there, we had to straighten it out. The only other thing right now is that this edge that I'm focusing the camera on, I don't have. So this sheet metal edge here really needs to go down a little bit. So there is a little bit of a gap there. So what I'm thinking about doing is I'll shut the deck lid. Well, I can't really. So I'll put it on my head there. What I'm thinking about doing is actually coming along and cutting this and trying to make this sheet metal panel go down a little bit further, because there is a little bit of a gap there. We only need about 1/8 of an inch, so that, because right now that deck lid is kind of resting on it. We need about 1/8 of an inch clearance for that deck lid to close properly. So that's my thought process right now. I'm gonna go get some lunch, walk away and think about it for a little while if there's another option, and then we'll come back at it and solve the last part of it. But the deck lid is in. It is going up and down. It's 90% of the way there. We just have to solve the last clearance issue here with it. So just to show where the interference I think is coming from, if you can see where the latch would go right there, it's coming in contact with the sheet metal. And you can see a little bit of a gap between the sheet metal and the structural piece underneath it. So like I said, I think right now the solution is to slice that sheet metal, weld it back up, and drop it to get the clearance. It's not really possible to take the tail pan off right now after I've welded everything in place. And like I said, if I were to drop the tail pan, it would actually extend below the corners. This is one of the reasons why I really like to make my own panels. I've struggled with some of the aftermarket stuff over the years. There are some really good quality stuff out there, but most of it, you'd spend almost as much time adjusting, tweaking, bending, cutting, that it actually takes less time to make a new one. But anyways, we're gonna make do with this. This isn't too bad. I think the solution is to section a little bit of that sheet metal out and then pick up the clearance. Okay, well, I'm going to do that video again. I just did a little spiel there on time lapse, and obviously you wouldn't have been able to see it, so we'll go in video mode this time. So there's the deck lid fitted, probably 95% good. A whole bunch of different things I did to it. As I mentioned previously, I showed you, hopefully in the time lapse, the top of this panel, I had to put a mini grinder cut into it and basically lower it so that it would actually be relieved. The underneath here, this section of the inner trunk lid was actually crushed and pointing towards the bottom, so it's causing interference. The lip up here was bent out. There was a lot of body fill on it. And also it was too long in one spot, so you saw me grind some of this away, weld it up, and basically improve that kind of a fit. Now, the deck lid still does overlap. It's still slightly proud of the surface, but part of that is the way it's supposed to be, because for water control. You know, all these old cars and even modern cars, in some cases, they can't keep water from getting into the vehicle. So they allowed it to get in, but they actually directed it out, either through channels or holes in the floor. The old Model Ts are the same way. There's a rain gutter on the side. Rain comes down the back of here. This panel is up underneath, so it rolls over. It can go into this groove, down in the rain gutter on the inside and out through the floor. Same thing for the deck lid. Water comes down here and drips off of it, same as the drip edge would be on the top of your roof. Same concept. So right now, I think I'm quite happy with that. I still might tweak it a little bit more, but for now, I'm going to move on to something else. As I said, I'll be switching back and forth between the 27T and the 33. I didn't do a whole lot of work on the 33 last week, so I've got to catch up on a whole bunch of small stuff. Some of it is time-lapse worthy, some of it is not, so it'll be a combination of show and tell and then also time-lapse at the same time. So we'll keep up some of that stuff for you. So today, back working on the 33, there's a few things on the wiring I've been putting off doing. One of them is to wire up all the gauges. Now, in this particular case, there's I guess old school mechanical, if you want to call it, temperature gauge and fuel pressure sending unit that actually have like a cable going down to the engine. It's not done by sending you like the electrical sending units, so to speak. So those only have like a gauge light power to them. Over on the other side of the steering column, there is a voltmeter. Now, what the owner does not want to do is drill any new holes in this original 33 dash. So what we're going to do, the oil pressure and the temperature sending unit is hanging off the bottom of the dash. Over on the other side, the voltmeter is doing the same. The one thing that, and then for the speedometer and tachometer, he was able to buy a gauge that fit in the original hole. So you can see it there. It's a speedometer on the top and a tachometer on the bottom. So that fits in the original hole. So he's happy with that. What I do have to do, I've got to make a bracket because I have over here, I have a fuel sending unit. So I'm going to make a bracket for that so it'll hang off the dash. Got to mount the horn underneath the car somewhere, just a small little thing we got to do. And then we've got the temperature control unit here that came with the fans. We're going to try and run that as well. So I'm going to set the time lapse up for some of this. More than likely for making the bracket for the fuel sending unit. One didn't come with it, so it's going to hang off of the bottom of the dash like the other ones do. And then I'll try and cover as much of this small stuff as I can. So that was making a bracket for the gauge. I've got it hanging up there. I would normally take this outside and paint it outside, but I tried to spray it in a direction I wouldn't get any kind of overspray on anything important. But right now I'm gonna let that dry for the next 24 hours or so. I'll put a couple coats of just Thermclad gloss paint onto it. The other bracket hanging here is a bracket that I'm gonna use to mount the horns to the frame. There is a hole in the frame that I can use, and then the other hole will put the horn onto it. And then of course, like I said, that is the gauge mounting bracket. I just showed you me making it out of, I think it's 14 gauge sheet metal that I used. So it's not flimsy, but then I put 2 holes into it. So we'll use that to mount the gauge. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna keep on doing time lapse of me doing stuff. When it's too much or you don't like it, let me know. And I'm gonna try and cover more of the details of what I do. I got very positive feedback from people privately at car shows, on YouTube, Instant Messenger, everything else. Keep on doing it. So I'll do it until you say that it's too much, or if it's still not enough, I'll try and do more. But anyways, next up, what I'm going to do, I'll let that dry. I've got to work on it. What I've got is a temperature controlled switch here that came with the fan. This is just something we got off of Amazon. We've bought it quite a few times from this brand, Evil Energy. Works good. May not be the best, but I think it's a pretty good quality setup. So there's a little switch mechanism. There's a fuse, and there's 4 lines that we have to run. In order to run this, you have to have, right there, you've got to come off directly off the battery, which I've got a line running for that. And then you've also got a fuse line coming from the ignition. We've got that. We have to install the temperature sending unit. And then of course we have to run off the fans. Now I'm going to run 2 fans, 2 small fans in this particular case. Got to make sure that either I put quick disconnects or disconnect lines onto it so I could reverse the polarity, or I've got to run a line to make sure that I've got the fans going in the right direction, because you can switch the direction of the fans. So there is a multiple wiring diagram here that I'm going to be using versus this plain and simple one here. But anyways, it should work just fine. They're 2 small fans. They're not running the full 30 amps that the fuse is rated for. I think there's 75 watts or something like that, which is divided by 12. Anyways, we'll work through it. I'll set it up. I'll try and test it, but that's next up to get that wired on the 33 coupe. So a little explanation what happened in a time lapse. I have two fans, two 10-inch fans on the front. There are from two different suppliers. I was checking to see which was clockwise, counterclockwise, push-pull, because I've actually got some stuff, a lot of stuff we buy these days come from China, and for whatever reason, ground is not black. It could be blue or any other color. So I kind of messed around with the battery there and some jumper cables to make sure that I had both of the fans going the same way. Initially, I thought I had one with a black ground, one with a blue ground, but in the end, it turned out that we had Americanized Chinese fans. So blue was power, black was ground, and because we had to reverse them, I put power on the black wires and ground on the blue. The temperature control solenoid, or whatever you want to call it, I've located just inside the frame here, close to the front. There's constant power as well as ignition power going to it. Then I also had to run a line up here, which I'm going to cover with some plastic casing here in a few minutes. But I had to run a temperature sending unit up to the engine. Now, initially I didn't think that we were running a heater in this, but the owner dropped off a little mini heater. So I only had two other places to hook up, basically where I could put a temperature sender, one with the intake manifold and one down there on the water pump. This other one here is the temperature gauge sending unit, so couldn't use that to run the fan. So I ran to the hardware store looking for a brass fitting, came up with an iron one. Not too pretty, not too modern hot roddy, but as far as going with something more would you do back in the day, this is what we would do back in the 70s, the 80s, when we were putting a hot rod together. We would use whatever we could find to solve the problem. So we've got an iron T and an iron nipple going into the intake manifold, and then the temperature sending unit right there for the automatic fan. You can see it inside. So what we'll do now is the owner's going to bring me some 3/8 nipples, one here and one there, and ultimately they will go into the heater that's going to go into the dash. He plans to drive this early or late in the year and kind of wants to have some heat going up on the windshield frame to make sure that it doesn't condensate or anything like that. So anyways, that'll be another day. Right now we do have the fans hooked up and the wiring hooked up to it, and we're off to the next thing. Previously, when we fit the 33 hood on, we had some cowl lacing that I thought was correct. It still could be correct, but it was this style, kind of like a figure-8 style of cowl lacing. We put it on, put it in the original holes, but we found that the hood was actually sitting way too low, even after we kind of tipped it up and everything else. Now, played around with it a little bit, but what the owner has said is that we can use this style cowl lacing. They use it on 33 to 34s. I'm not 100% sure. I'm very familiar with this. This is what I used on 32s a lot. So the intention with this is to install that with some pop rivets through these holes. Now, since we're not going to run hood sides, I'm not going to extend the cowl lacing down below this point. We're just going to go from the center of the hood all along here up to this hole, just enough to sit underneath of the hood. Now for the front grille, we are going to, well, I'm going to try this thinner stuff because we've got a couple rolls of it. I think it's going to work fine with the grill shell, but we'll do the same approach where we're only going to do it across the section where the hood sits. So that's what's up next. So there's the hood on with the sticker cowl lacing in the back, made a huge difference. The hood is actually kind of in line with the cowl now, so I brought it back up, so that was a good choice. And then in the front, we used the original style. I put the hood latches in place, and I had to move the radiator back that way, as you can see from the time lapse. So we got her fitting pretty good right now. I'm not going to lock down the radiator support rods until we get the I've got to get a radiator cap to go on here, so I have to take the grill shell off and bolt it up from underneath, so it's kind of just fitted in place for the time being. We've got a couple screws in place, but we're working our way through all the little things we got to do. But that's two more things off the list of stuff to do. So right now, the gauge bracket that I made yesterday, the paint is dry onto it, so we can put that in, and then I can put the horn in place. So that's next up on the list. So I did do a little bit of stuff off camera here, hooked up the rest of the wires to the gauges, ran the ground, ran the power to the lights to the gauges. There's probably about 9 or 10 wires. There's still 2 blue wires hanging down there in the black. One of them is labeled for the wipers, so we've got to hook the wipers up yet. The other one is labeled fan switch, so I'm assuming from this kit that the fan switch is basically to turn the power to the front electrical fan. From what little I can decipher from the instructions. And then the last wire over there is a black wire with no label onto it. I'm thinking it's a ground, gonna have to check it out and figure it out. But also there's 2 wires here for the dome light. Got to wire the dome light up yet. So a few more things left to do on the wiring, but I think I got 7, 8, 9 wires all hooked up to the gauges, the fuel sending unit, the tach, the indicator lights for the lights. So in that specific speedometer there, it's a speedometer on the top, a tach on the bottom, and it's got a high beam, a left and a right indicator light in that. So those had to be wired in. That's done. Again, it's crimping wires and putting heat shrink onto them. I didn't cover it on time lapse. We'll carry on with something else. Still a few more things left to do. The wiper motor here, we've got a wiper switch. This wiper motor, as far as I can tell, I've done a trial fit with it. I think I need to put a spacer in. We have to cut off some of the threaded tube as well as some of the rotating tube in order to make it fit. We've got an e-brake cable, an emergency brake handle, which we ultimately have to fit on, an overflow, the GPS sending unit. Gonna pick away at some of those ones. I'm not sure which ones we're gonna get done before the end of the video, but I'm gonna pick something and work on it. So I think I'm going to work on the radiator overflow tank now. I'm going to try and make a bracket and use these keyholes in the side of the radiator to make a bracket to come out here to attach the overflow tank onto it. I've done it before out of aluminum on the other cars. I think on this one I'll just grab a piece of 14 or 16 gauge sheet metal, pop a bunch of holes into it in the right place, put a coat of black paint onto it, and hopefully that will fix the problem up and have somewhere to mount the overflow tank. So follow along. the bracket for the overflow. One thing I had realized was that in the position that I had measured it, the overflow tank was sitting too low. Low anyways. Enough such that when we put the tubes along the bottom of them, there's a drain and an overflow tube. It was actually sitting too close to the cross member. So what I did, I put another set of holes in the bracket off camera when I realized that. So there's another set of holes to raise the bracket up a little higher, so we'll have room to put the hoses underneath. Well, more room anyways. So that's got 2 coats of black paint onto it. We'll wait for it to dry, give it 24 hours, and then tomorrow we'll bolt on the overflow tank. Well, I have a little bit more maintenance work to do today. I mean, building hot rods is one thing, but then you drive them and use them. And over time, we got to replace parts and everything else. So part of what we do here is we have to maintain our hot rods. Now, the 29 Model A has been on the road 12 years. It's got 15 or 16,000 miles onto it. Not really a lot, but we've done some work this year, changed the tires, some bushings, added springs in. But one thing I noticed was that when I was running, I was just getting just over 12 volts from the alternator. Which is kind of on the low side. We should be seeing around 13.8 to 14.2 volts, I think, on the voltmeter when she's running. So something's going on with the alternator. Now, typically what we use or have been using is the GM style 1-wire alternators with the Ford housings on them. Really simple to use. I typically like to use this brand, Tough Stuff. There might be other ones, but the one thing I like about this brand is that I don't have to run an exciter wire. I only have to run the single wire to it. It will charge at low RPMs. Other alternators, the 1-wire alternators, a lot of times you've got to run an exciter wire to it to make sure that it charges in the low RPM range. So what I got to do today, I could probably get this one rebuilt. There's a couple places still around to do that. But what I chose to do is I just bought a new one. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take that one off, put a new one on, and I should be getting a new belt here soon. So I'll put a new belt on it well at the same time. the new alternator's on. I don't have a new belt yet, so I'm waiting on that. When I took the alternator off, I took the time to, and hopefully you could see it, I changed some of the ends of the wires, put some shrink tubing onto them to kind of just tidy it up, make it a little better. Wasn't loose, wasn't frayed, but just kind of the new standard to do things, kind of do it just a little nicer. I'm trying to get a belt that is actually 1/2 inch shorter, so I can bring my alternator in, tuck it in a little bit more. I've got the room to do it on the adjustment. So anyways, that's on its way. So hopefully we can get the alternator belt on and the bracket on the overflow tank on the 33 before the end of the video. So that's the radiator overflow tank installed. As you can see from the video, it went on quite easily. Made the brackets up. I made an extra set of holes so that it would sit a little higher. That way I would have clearance to put the rubber hose going in that will fill the tank up, and then the rubber hose going out, because unfortunately I didn't make that right measurement to begin with. But anyways, it's a straightforward tank, straightforward mount, just keeping it simple. You can make it out of aluminum, you can powder coat it, you can do whatever you want, but I mean, it's on there very sturdy right now. As you can see from the, hopefully you saw from the video, I struggled trying to get the upper hose on here because the nipple on this was a much larger size than what it is on the bottom of the overflow tank, which is very common, happens quite a bit whenever I'm doing this. I tried using the heat shrink gun, which is the first time I tried to use that to make the rubber more pliable to get on, and that just made it hot. Didn't make it any easier. So I resorted to the old dishwashing soap or washing up liquid, depending on where you're from. Put a little bit of that onto it and it would slide right on, just with a little bit of pressure. So on this end, I typically don't put a hose clamp here because there's a really big bulge on the end of it. It's not going anywhere, and it's just for a drain. You can put a hose clamp on it, not a problem. It's always safe to be, better safe than sorry. But on the bottom, I always put hose clamps on here just because gravity and other things, if it knocks it, moves it, hits it, it'll come off. The worst thing that's going to happen is you're going to get a little bit of antifreeze or water blow out of there. But anyways, we've got hose clamps there. The drain itself is just going to loop into the old flathead engine mount hole there, and then the hose along the bottom. And then I just simply put a couple zip ties here on the side of it to hold the hose up against the tank so it doesn't flop around. So just very simple, practical, application of putting a overflow tank in. Nothing special about it, just we need it to function, and then function and look okay. So mission accomplished on that. So that's it for another week of Coldstream Rod Shop. We covered quite a few things this week. We changed our format so that we're showing more of what we do. I got a lot of positive feedback from last week about doing that, so we're going to carry on with it, do it as much as we can. Right now, to be honest with you, I can't remember everything that we did, but we did a lot of things on the 33, covered a lot of, made a few little stuff. Did some work on a 29 Model A, put a new alternator onto it, which actually turned out not to be the problem. It's actually the voltmeter onto it. So, but anyways, I've got a brand new alternator on the Model A. It's safe to drive. Kind of still happy with that. That's okay. What I'm going to do now, though, we've been driving the Model A and trying switching it up with the Model A and the Roadster. The camera lady is not going to go with me tonight, but she told me that I could take her Roadster up to Gia's, which is a little get together on Wednesday nights. A bunch of hot rod people and old cars get together, usually have a hamburger, have an ice cream or something. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to take her car. She's been out into it, but she's letting me drive it. So going to take her car and I'm going to go up to Gia's for a little outing. So that's it. Please like, share, tag, and subscribe. Come on back next week, see what we're up to. Everybody take care and have a great week. Thanks. Have a great week, everybody. Take care.